good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I am Susan. I'm going to talk to you for the next 12 to 15 to 16 minutes. But it is so wonderful to be back in Charlottesville. I haven't been here since, this is going to date me, 1998. But before I get started, I'd love to just see a show of hands. How many of you have had multiple lives? Okay. Well, I'm probably on my 9th life at this point. So where to begin? This is the family that I found myself in back in, I don't even want to say the day, but a long time ago when the dinosaurs roamed. And that's me, the little one, being held by the beautiful woman in the yellow dress. And this was a typical backyard in upstate New York. Lord knows why my father had a suit on while we were all out in the backyard, but regardless. And my father, interestingly enough, was a professor. So here we are, very close to a college campus. He was what I would think is an original feminist. He taught at a women's college for 39 years. And my mother, also with a sense of service, was an executive with public television, working at various PBS television stations, heading up public relations. And both of them instilled a tremendous sense of service in my early life, and certainly my brother and sister. Oftentimes, I would say to my mom as a child, "Mom, why don't you work for CBS or ABC? You'd make so much more money." And she would look at me and say, "The content was terrible, and instead, I want to be doing something good." And when I would come home from friends' houses, and I'd say to my dad, "How come they have such, nicer furniture, bigger house, fancier?" And he'd say, "Well, first of all, how much do they owe? And secondly, what are they doing for the community to give back?" So this was the world that kind of enveloped me my entire childhood. And clearly, service and giving back was made a priority over material consumption. So fast forward to today, after many, many, many years, probably close to 30 at this point, with a career starting in journalism, then marketing, then communications, I realized that somehow I could combine that sense of service and self with my traditional skills, which were very good in the marketing, sales, business development world. And throughout this entire time of 30 years, I always had one foot out the door, serving on nonprofit boards, volunteering, always cheering for the little guy, and maybe that's because I'm so little myself, but you get the picture. But I finally realized at the grand old age of 50 that I could start my own consulting firm. Now, that's not to say that I wasn't terrified, and at 50, you don't have as much energy as you used to at age 25 or 30. And to give you an idea of how terrified I was when I started the new consulting firm, I left my last job on a Friday. This was approximately 4 years ago. And I started my consulting firm on a Monday. I didn't even take a day off. And you know why? Because the 2 organizations that were willing to hire me said they would start that Monday. And I figured if I took a few days off, they'd change their mind. If only I knew now what I knew 4 years ago, I probably would have taken maybe a week off, maybe 2 weeks, just so I could take a break. So how did I get here? How did I actually, after many, many years of toiling in corporate America, realize that I could potentially, or I could actually run a business? I'm not a good Excel man. Yuck, hate Excel. I'm not good managing money. I don't know anyone actually who is, but regardless, I didn't have what I thought were the typical attributes. But that last year that I was at my previous role, I started to kind of do some really deep thinking. And I found that there were 3 key themes that really would help propel me into potentially being an entrepreneur. I had, number 1, an entrepreneurial attitude. And I'll get into that in a moment. 2, I had a deep love and fascination of people. And not just, hi, how are you doing, people, but hi, tell me about your life, tell me where you're from, what makes you happy, what motivates you, and to the point where I loved connecting people and bringing them together. Even today, I go by the alias Serial Connector, because absolutely I love, love, love connecting people. I mean, I'm probably, in the shtetls back in old Russia, I was probably that old matchmaker in Fiddler on the Roof. And number 3, I increasingly, and this probably comes from age, but I actually know some young people with this trait or this attribute, a kind of what the hell, why not spirit. How many of you maybe as you're getting older, starting to feel like, why not, right? You only live once. So the first came from the attitude of feeling entrepreneurial, came from years in each of my jobs where I was always given special projects to run. It was always like, Susan, you go run this, because you'll get it done. You'll meet your deadlines. There's been a joke about me that my epitaph is going to say, she got shit done. And I did. But in the 90s, when I was working for PR Newswire for many years, I was very fortunate to be able to do maybe 2 years here doing this, 2 years here doing product development, 2 years here opening our offices in Beijing and Shanghai. And you get the gist. I was with them for 17 years, and that is probably why I was able to stay with them for 17 years. But within the company, I was what is called an entrepreneur. I was building businesses within. So very entrepreneurial in spirit. When I was at USA Today, which was my first job out of college, so I'm going back in time in the 80s, I was actually creating a universal calendar of events that would be taking place over the course of the next 20 years. So again, a really interesting project within a bigger company that would serve the employees all over in the news division. And then the last place I ended before starting my own company was a consulting firm, a boutique social good consulting firm called Fenton, which for 30 years had worked on behalf of NGOs and organizations doing good for the world. My remit when I went to Fenton was to create a corporate responsibility practice. So I went in to start that program, and I was there for 4 years before I went. So if you see kind of the thread, all of these positions were very much entrepreneurial. So what I started to realize was, wait a minute, I've been running businesses all along. So second was that incredible thirst and love of people. It was probably started, as a kid. I just always loved getting to know people, finding out what made them tick, what got them excited, and this translated quite well into anyone who wants to run their own business. I mean, I hate to say it, if you are going to run a company, you have to like people, because you're going to hire people, you're going to sell to people, you are going to at some time have to let people go, but in other words, you have to have that interest. And another joke, in addition to getting shit done, people say is once I befriend them, it's like Velcro, because you're stuck with me for life. And that has served me well, because over the last 20 years, I have maintained my networks and kept my friendships going and always have been there to help people when they need them. And you know how you hear about people who are always taking meetings when people contact them about finding a job? I'm that person. It's kind of crazy, but I really try to do all of those brain-picking sessions, because that helped me when I was younger. Also, many of you, I'm sure, are active on social media. People have said that I was doing social media before social media existed. So when Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and some of these others launched, I dove in head first. I felt very comfortable in those platforms, and I learned very quickly that the key to those platforms is listening more than speaking. And I often say that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, both in real life and, of course, online. But that has helped me, and I have to say it has propelled my firm, McPherson Strategies, over the last 4 years, because knock on wood, or knock on my arm, all of our business over the last 4 years has been inbound. Okay, which I don't know if that's very common in the consulting industry, but I feel blessed, and I'm thankful for the fact that I have cultivated this tremendous network. But again, it wasn't strategically, it was because I just had this fascination for people. And it is a joke about fixing people up, but I have fixed up 4 or 5 couples that are now married with children. So go figure. Maybe I'd probably make more money doing that. So again, I cannot credit my network and friends and people for getting me to where I am today. But the third is being comfortable with risk and being comfortable with change. I looked back over my last 30 years and I realized I had taken a lot of risks and I had dealt with major challenges. I mean, we all do, right? But I moved cross country not once but twice to cities where I knew absolutely no one. The first time from Washington, D.C. to Southern California, and boy, did I feel like a fish out of water in Southern California. And then from Seattle to Brooklyn, which is where I am now. In 2003, I was going through a divorce, and I picked up and moved cross country, knew no one in New York City, was terrified. And to give you an idea where I am now, 2003 to today, last summer I went to a wedding, and when I sat down at my placemat, the card on top said, Susan McPherson, the most connected woman in New York City. So I was like, I mean, it was lovely, but it was kind of like, really? But it shows just that love of people that happen, and New York is a fabulous place to meet people. But back to the point of taking risks. So clearly, if I had done both those moves, if I had started new jobs, gone through a divorce and then another long-term relationship and survived, I could run a business. Why not? And again, I want to remind you that the one thread through all these businesses was this propensity of social good, giving back, volunteering. But last, I think it's important to share advice that my father had given me with regards to risk. And I still, every decision almost I've ever made in my life, I think I can hear his words. Nothing is a prison sentence. Except, of course, if it's a prison sentence. But this means, let's not go there, right? But for a moment, if you think about that, you can always go back. You know, when I moved to Brooklyn, I thought to myself, Seattle will still be there. I can go back. When I left Washington, D.C. to Southern California, I said, it'll be back. So again, this sense of taking risks. And then my eyesight is too poor at this point to read the quote, but Whitney Johnson is an exceptional author, and I highly recommend her works and writing on disruption and disrupting yourself. But just take a moment and read that if you've not already. And interestingly enough, what started with my parents ended with my parents. And I mentioned to you, I have faced tragedies in my life and challenges. When I was 20, my mother was killed at the prime of her career at age 56 in a hotel fire in Puerto Rico on New Year's Eve that killed 97 other people. This was obviously long before 9/11, but it was a mini 9/11. It was the hotel was set on fire by an angry employee, a labor strife. And my life changed. It was never the same when you lose somebody in that kind of capacity and someone as important as your mother. And she was 56, which isn't so far from where I am today. And interestingly enough, she was known as a connector, and she was known to wear her heart on her sleeve. So clearly the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But as I got to where I am today, I realized I am living her legacy. And that one thread that seemed to run through everything that thread of social good, of giving back, and why today I actually run a consulting firm that works on behalf of helping LGBTQ be able to get married, that helps women's access to reproductive health, that works along with corporations in helping them partner with NGOs to affect positive change. That trajectory is her, and I'm carrying on where her life was stopped so suddenly. And the best thing is now as a founder, I get to do it on my own terms and with her in my heart every single day. So that's my story, and I thank you very much. And I'm here if you have questions. Thank you.